Good day and welcome. Welcome to NAC TV Access Channel here in Neepawa. We're very honored to have a special guest with us today. And today we're going to talk about the journey of a very special life. For those that live in the McCurry area and Neepawa area and many other places, you'll probably recognize our guest. She is Olga Code. And as of today, Olga is 100 years, 7 months young. And it is amazing of some of the things that this lady has accomplished in her life. And she's had quite an interesting journey, and she has come to share it with us here today. So I hope we can get your journey together, and I hope our viewers enjoy it as much as I enjoy visiting with you, Olga. So thank you for taking the time to join us today, and welcome to NAC TV.
Thank you.
Olga, it's amazing. Most people, when they get to be 100 years old, they slow down a little bit, but you haven't slowed down a lot. You're still very mobile, and it's just a pleasure to talk to you today. Now, 100 years ago, where did this journey start? Where were you born?
I was born in a house at home in Beaver, Manitoba.
Yes, Beaver, Manitoba.
Beaver, yes.
And
it wasn't very much of a place. There was only, we lived in the section house because my father was the section foreman there, and there was, as far as I know, 3 or 4 other buildings.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there was your mom and dad. Your dad was a section foreman, you said.
Yes, on the railroad.
How many siblings did you have, or do you have?
I had totally, they weren't all born then, but I had 2 brothers and 4 sisters.
That's the total
Family.
family.
7 of us, yes.
Yeah. And that, in your maiden name was what?
We called it Kutcher.
Kutcher.
Yes. The spelling is like butcher. It's Kutcher, and some say Kutcher and some say Kucher, but we were always Kutchers.
Okay. So when you lived in Beaver, Manitoba.
I lived there for the first 8 years. And then because we had to go a long way to school, we had to go 3 miles. And my oldest brother was at that time almost finished with the country school. So he would have to go to a school somewhere else if he wanted to continue the education.
Yes.
And my father was sure that we all wanted to have an education. So we left Beaver and we moved to Mackinac.
Mackinac, Manitoba.
Mackinac, Manitoba, which is, it's a little closer here. Not much bigger, but still, it had 2 or 3 stores, and the school was up to grade 11.
Grade 11.
Grade 11. So we had a few more years to go to school there.
Okay. Did you complete your grade 11 in Mackinac?
In Mackinac, right. And then I went from grade 12. One of my other classmates, actually the only other girl that was in my class, was going to St. Norbert for her grade 12. And I said, well, there's no reason why I can't go there too. So I went and took my grade 12 at St. Norbert.
In Winnipeg, or just south of Winnipeg there?
Yeah, it's part of Winnipeg now almost.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
it wasn't then. As a matter of fact, my first trip out there, I went from Winnipeg to St. Norbert by train.
Yes. Yeah.
It's only a few miles, but now it's all one sort of.
Yeah. Well, that's so you stayed in Winnipeg for your grade 12.
Yes.
And
then I went to Teachers College in Winnipeg at that time.
Yeah.
It's moved since then, but it was at William and Gertie at that time, and I went and took my teacher training there.
Yes.
And then I went out to work.
So then you went teaching school.
That's right.
Where was your first school that you taught at?
My first school was it was called Mossvale. It was out, I think it's west, I'm not sure, past Grandview.
Oh, yes, okay.
About maybe 10 miles or so on the other side of Grandview in the country.
Yep.
It was not too far from the Timberton Road. You know where Timberton, you go up to there's a reserve up there.
Oh, okay.
And it's a matter of fact, the second place where I boarded, their farm was adjacent to that road.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
to that highway that went to Timberton.
So this was a country school, and you
A
had
country
grades.
school,
How many
all-
grades did
up
you
to
have?
grade, up to grade 8.
Up to grade 8.
Up to grade 8, right.
Yeah. Well, that would be quite an experience, eh?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it was quite all right, though.
And then from that school, where did you go?
From that, I was only there for a year because it was kind of, well, I had no way of getting around because I had no vehicle, and everybody else lived a long ways. I had to walk over a mile to go to school every day, and especially if the weather wasn't good, or in the winter when it was cold.
Yeah.
That's quite a little ways to walk. And then the next year, I got a school in the Keld area, which is south of Dauphin, perhaps 10 miles.
Yes.
And I taught there for 2 years. But I lived in a teacherate, so I didn't have to walk to school very far, just across the yard. And I stayed there for the 2 years, but the second year, I got married the second year. So I left the country, and I went to Winnipeg. My husband was in the army by that time, and I got a school at St. Charles.
Oh, yes.
I don't think that school is there anymore.
No.
But it used to be just where the perimeter, where the two highways meet, when you're coming into Winnipeg, and you just come to the perimeter, and just on the other side of the perimeter was
Oh, yes,
St.
yes.
Charles School.
Yeah.
And I taught there for the year.
Yeah.
And then by that time the war was over.
Yeah.
And so we figured if the war is over, my husband would be discharged within a short while. So I got a school at McCurry. And he bought a farm, a quarter section.
Was your husband, was he raised in the McCurry area?
He was raised in McCurry.
And what was his first name?
Peter.
Peter Code.
Peter Code.
Peter
right.
Code, okay.
Yes. Hmm. And so when he was discharged, we figured if the war was over, he would be discharged shortly. But it just so happened I went back to McCurry in September to start school in the fall. He didn't get discharged till January. So
Okay.
here we were, him in Winnipeg, me out in McCurry, till actually after middle of January before he got out of the army. And then by the time we got things organized, we moved out to the farm the 1st of March.
Okay.
And those we moved out to the farm. I'll tell you this: we didn't have anything, nothing, absolutely nothing, and he got a team of horses, no harness, but we had to get some harness to put on them, and then we got this wagon, no wagon box, just the flat boards on the box.
Yeah.
We put everything we owned on those boards, and moved out to the farm.
So you
We
didn't have to spend a very long packing.
Not
then.
an animal, no cows or pigs or chickens, nothing. But anyway, my father gave us a couple of $100. We went out and bought a couple of cows. My mother gave us half a dozen, or a dozen, I don't remember exactly how many, hens,
Yeah.
so that we had chickens to start with. And then we can get a couple of weanlings from the neighbors to start raising pigs. And then, of course, you start growing a crop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yes.
and you were a big part of all the chores and all the work on the farm, as well as looking after the
Not-
house too, I understand.
I didn't do too much farm work. I did not that I didn't do any, but very little.
Oh.
Because the year after we moved out to the farm, we were married for 3 years when Catherine came along. And after that, I stayed at home. The first year I went teaching,
Yeah.
but after the summer, I stayed home for a couple of years. And so I didn't really, I had to walk across the field, but it was from our place to the highway was only about half a mile. So
Okay. So
it wasn't very much fun in the winter, though.
so your children, and how many children do you and Peter have?
2.
Two.
I have Catherine, my daughter, who lives in Eden,
Yes.
and I have a son, Clifford, who lives in, well, he has an acreage. He has just out of White City in Saskatchewan, near Regina.
Near Regina.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a daughter and a son.
Yeah, that's right.
And Catherine and her husband still live out
Out
here.
at Eden.
Out at
Right,
Eden.
yeah. Mhm.
Well, that's interesting. And then you you stayed home. You were a homemaker, and you continued to farm for a number of years.
Yes,
then?
I stayed at home for a while, and then I guess when my son was, I took one stint when my daughter was young too, and my sister-in-law looked after her while I was at school, and then I would go back home. But then when Cliff came along, I didn't go to school anymore for a while. I stayed at home till one fall, the trustees from the country school, Canal, came to ask me whether I would come to teach, because at that time teachers were very scarce, and there were a lot of them that were on permit. Well, they had hired a permit teacher, but he was a young man, I don't know what to call him a man, because I think he wasn't that too much interested in what he was doing anyway, so they let him go, and they needed a teacher. So they came and asked me whether I would come and teach, and I said, no, I can't go because my son is not old enough to go to school yet. He's only 4 years old. Well, that was fine, but soon they were back again. So you have to come. We have nobody, and we need a teacher. So I decided, well, I suppose. So I got, there was actually two grannies. One just lived down the second house from where I lived, and the other one just lived across the street. So I got these two ladies looked after my son while I went to school.
Okay.
And the next year, he was 5 years old. I took him with me to school. And the country school, it was sort of, the trustees were very good. They didn't mind it. He wasn't quite old enough because his birthday's in February, and I started him in the fall, you see, or took him with me, and he started school in the country. And I was out there for 4 years.
4 years.
4 years at Canal before I came to McCurry to teach grade 1. And I stayed in grade 1 till I retired.
And you were still living on the farm at that time?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and you had two children, Catherine and Cliff.
Yeah.
And now you have grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
I don't have too many. I have 3 grandchildren.
Yes.
And I have to stop and think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 great-grandchildren.
5 great-grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And that's it.
Well, they're very fortunate to have a very wonderful grandmother and a great-grandmother.
I don't see them very often because my son lives in Saskatchewan,
Yeah.
and his daughter, who is also a teacher, she's still working, and she has 3 children, but her daughter never did get married, so my daughter had, like I said, my son had only the one child.
Okay.
Yeah. So she has 3 children. So I have 3 great-grandchildren there and 2 on Catherine's side.
Yes.
So that's 5 great-grandchildren. That's all. That's not a very big family.
No.
No.
So you taught school in McCurry till you retired. What age did you retire from teaching back in those years?
Well, I think I was about 63 when I retired.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
But
you were
I
still
taught-
living on the farm?
Yes, I taught when I retired, no. We had moved to town, I think. Well, we hadn't moved to town. We weren't farming very much.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you a little story about, we wanted milk. We would milk the cow. Okay, we take as much milk as we wanted and put it in the fridge, and then we let the calf out. So the calf could milk the cow as long as she wanted until we ran out of milk. Then we would put the calf back into the barn overnight, milk the cow, and then let the calf out again.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what you call
And
sharing.
we didn't have to stay at home if we didn't want to. We just let the calf out.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good way of doing
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you moved into McCurry,
Yes.
and you stayed living in McCurry till you come to
Till I
Neepawa, and
come
that
to
was
Neepawa.
about what year?
1979.
You moved into McCurry.
Okay. I've been here for 11 to 12 years.
Okay. Oh, it's
Yeah.
okay. So
Yeah.
you've been in Neepawa for quite a number of years.
Yeah.
So 12 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
But your husband
Thanks.
had passed on already.
My husband died in 2000.
In 2000. And that was before you moved to Neepawa.
Oh, yes. I stayed there by myself for 8 years.
8 years.
8 years. I did my own. We had 2 lots and a big house
Yeah.
with 3 bedrooms and a I don't know what you'd call it, was our shop to start with, and our working room, and then we had the garage and two lots to cut grass on, and always had a big garden.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned your woodworking shop, and I would like you to expand on that because both you and your husband were gifted when it come to woodwork and carving, and you did a lot of construction in terms of when you built the house, including shingling it. Is that right?
Peter, I didn't have anything to do with building the house.
Okay.
No, we had carpenters.
Oh, okay.
Leonard Terrick's company built a house, actually.
Yeah. So what about the furniture?
The furniture, we bought it.
Oh, did you?
A lot of it. I can remember coming home one time. We bought some in Yorkton, my living room set, but we bought a lot of it in Brandon. Yeah.
Okay.
Or my Genair stove tops
Yeah.
and all this I bought in Brandon at this shop there.
Did you ever use Eaton's catalog back in those days, Olga?
We used Eaton's catalog, but not that much. No. The only thing is that the house burned down, and I can remember using the Eaton's, and I used the Eaton's catalog for a couple of things. One was to go through the catalog to check, because everything was in that Eaton's catalog,
Yeah.
to check, well, yes, I had one of these, and yes, I had one of these,
Yeah.
and I could mark them down. And the other thing I did was, when a young couple had come to this country to live because their relatives were living here, and the children couldn't speak English, so he taught the little boy English as much as he could. But when he came to school, I used the catalog to what's this and what's this,
Yeah. Yeah.
and to be able to teach him. But he was a very intelligent little boy.
Yeah. Well, there's a number of other areas that we want to touch on today, Olga, and one of them is your passion for physical activity. And from the time you were a young girl until this very day, you are still physically active. Can you share some of your activities over the years with us
Yeah.
and our viewers to tell us about some of the activities you accomplished and what
Yeah.
you did over your life?
Well, we had the ski hill, but I never downhill. I tried downhill. I didn't care for it that much. But I cross country all the time.
Yep.
I played golf, and I did a lot of biking. And we did I don't think there are too many trails up in the Riding Mountains that I haven't done, and some several times.
Yeah.
I like the Burroughs and Bittersweet Trail because it was very picturesque.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at one point, you got recognition from the Canadian government and the Governor General for riding a bike quite a distance, and how
Yes,
old were you when you got that
It was a
plaque?
walk-on, and the headquarters were in Toronto, and I got you marked down how far you had walked each day.
Oh, you walk, okay.
Yes, you walked. And I did a lot of bike-a-thons too, and walk-a-thons, but that was for local,
Yes.
different organizations. But this one was for Canada Wide,
Yeah.
and I entered, and one day I got a phone call from Toronto saying that I had won. I had walked 79 miles in 10 days.
That's quite an accomplishment.
I have the plaque to show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's quite an accomplishment, Olga. The other thing is that you were very involved in McCreary, you and your husband, I understand, in terms of physical fitness, which is good mentally and spiritually.
We took a course, the Manitoba government, the health department, I don't remember all the details about that, but they put on a workshop,
Yep.
which we attended, and then we had to go to Dauphin for another workshop where we got our certificates for being able to teach the workshop, so we got the permit to teach, and then that was if you went back to your own club and started the exercise program. So we did that. My husband and I went back to McCurry. We started the exercise program at the drop-in center in McCurry, and that was, I'm not sure, was it 19, in the late, it was before 2000, it was back 79, I think,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, or 89, I forgot what year it was. But we started the exercise program, and people came to do the exercise, and that program is still going today.
Really? Well, you must feel good about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know who teaches it now, but my husband and I took, like I was teaching the program up
Yeah.
until the time. And when he passed on, then another lady helped out with the program. And then when I left, well, somebody else had to take over. But they were still doing it just recently, I heard. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And
And then I started a walking program too. It's called Walk On, with headquarters in Toronto. And we used to, after school, we would walk in the school, and you made up one side where the elementary, and then we went across to the other side and come down the senior part all the way around. And I think you had to do over 2 miles, 2 circles rather, to make a mile.
yeah.
But we all had our little gadgets there to tell us how many miles we had walked.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. And you still are quite active in walking, and also your regular fitness programs, and I see you have a bicycle in your apartment, and you still use it, right?
I still use it. I used it this morning. I did 200 rounds this morning, excepting that I don't use the bicycle in the summer. I walk outside.
You walk outside.
I walk outside. And sometimes it depends on how I feel and what the weather's like.
Yes.
I do 8 blocks or 10 blocks every day.
Every day.
Every day.
And that must have a lot to do. You've obviously have a benefit in terms of your physical activity. Have had a great benefit from being active.
Well, probably it helps because I have been active. I've been on a good many walkathons.
Yeah.
Yeah, and raised a lot of money for different organizations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I wanted to touch on, and this is where you and I, Judy and I met you, Olga, 10, 12 years ago in the Manitoba Senior Games held in June in different locations across Manitoba. And I just want to share with our viewers that Olga has a very keen interest on playing cards and participating with other seniors across the province. And we had the pleasure of competing against her in card games. And you still play cards quite regularly, do you not?
Mm-hmm. Excepting for this week, and they've got some COVID to think about now.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
kind of
yes.
changed things. But
Yeah.
up
No,
until
I still
COVID.
play. I can still see the cards. That's strange. My eyesight is very poor,
Yeah.
and that's probably part of my problem. But I can still play cards.
What games did you enjoy, and what games did you participate? I know you participated in more than one
Yeah.
in the
In
senior
the games, in
Yeah.
the Manitoba game,
Yeah,
it was whist and cribbage.
and cribbage.
I played bridge all the time too, but I don't remember playing bridge in the games. I know I played whist because I've got one of my medals for
I know.
whist, but I've
Yes.
got several for cribbage. And
Yeah.
I went to the nationals 2 different years. Once it was in Sydney, Nova Scotia, and once we went to Moncton, New Brunswick for the national games. I could have gone other years, but I didn't go. Because you have to win in Manitoba
Yes.
before you can go to the nationals.
Well, I
Yeah.
remember quite clearly that you and your partner beat us quite soundly in whist. So 2 years in a row, that was the year you got the
don't know.
gold medals. And you participated in the games right up until COVID just kind of shut them down.
I still play. We played up until about a couple of weeks ago when COVID came back into our cribbage,
Oh,
because
yeah.
they play cribbage
Oh, you go down to the Legion
down to the Legion
every Wednesday
every
night.
Wednesday evening and play cribbage. Right. I still do that with my neighbor,
Yeah, yeah.
and the two of us go. But 2 weeks ago, we had to, because one of the man who looks after the things there got COVID, so
Yeah.
we had to quit. So we haven't played now for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But on Wednesday nights, we play cribbage.
You still play. So you're still very active for 100 years old.
Yeah.
The other thing is that we would like to touch on is that you and your husband, and after your husband passed on, you did a lot of traveling. You've seen a lot of this great
Yes, we
world.
did a bit of traveling with the two of us. We did several cruises. I did 4 cruises on the Caribbean and stopped at some places. And then after my husband passed on, that year my first trip was down Casablanca. No, Casablanca was the second year. Down at Istanbul. I don't know what you call that city now. But anyway, down that part of the country, Turkey.
Yeah.
And then the next year I spent, I guess it must have been about, maybe 6 weeks or so down in Africa at Morocco.
Yeah.
And then my husband and I went to Australia and on New Zealand for a month.
Yeah.
And we toured Europe. That was with my husband, though.
Yes.
For a month. And we went to several countries in Europe. We went to, some I remember better than others. We went through Belgium and spent quite a few days in Holland.
Yes.
And then we went to Germany, Austria, Italy, a few days in Italy, riding the gondolas. And then we went to France and spent a few days in France and went back to England and spent another 10 days in London before we came back home. So we were gone for over a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was some of the highlights of all the trips you've taken? I know you were doing some climbing and hiking and biking
yes,
there too.
Actually, I think one of the highlights was, I went up to the highest lookout point in the Swiss Alps.
Yes.
But I think the highlight was when we went over to the islands and took the catamaran and went across to the island and went down underneath the water, down into they called a sub. It's like a little submarine sort of thing.
Oh yes.
And right down to the bottom of the ocean to see all the fish and the coral was beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah, Grand Banks.
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And you also did some climbing in Australia in the western part, I believe, that was of interest. Was there a particular mountain or something you climbed in Australia?
In Australia, I didn't climb too much. We went, not in Australia too much. The mountains, the Ayers Rock, they called it. It's not a mountain exactly. It's a rock, just a single monolith in the middle of nowhere, really.
Yeah.
I don't think they even allow you to climb it anymore. That's what I've heard. And that was one of the most dangerous things that I've ever done. Mind you, going up is not too bad because you can, this height or some places kind of level off, but then some go. And there was one place where they had a railing you could hold on to. But coming down, you had to be very, very careful. If you slipped and fell and down, that would be the end.
Yeah, yeah.
So you had to be very, very careful how you came down that mountain.
You've, from over the years that I've known you, Olga, and by the sounds of your life's journey, you had a lot of confidence in just stepping out and trying something new, different, and you didn't really know what the word fear meant.
Well,
were you born that way, or was there something special you did to develop that within your being?
I don't know. When I was very little, because when we moved to Mackinac, I'm just coming 8 years old. So it was before that, and I can remember riding on the side of the freight trains because our house was right against the railroad track because my father was a foreman there, and it would stop to leave water off because there was no good water, and it would stop there, and then it would take from the water tanks up to the station, which is a short little run. Well, we would hook onto the sides of the boxcars and ride on the side of the train. I remember doing that.
And you thought it was fun, eh?
Yeah, sure, it was fun. And I can remember sitting on the tracks, because we lived right by the track,
Yeah.
playing games. How many birds in the bush, with the little stones that were on the railroad track. Yeah.
Well,
And I can remember too, walking on I don't know if they have them anymore. Cattle corrals, stockyards they called them.
okay.
And
Yeah.
they used to put the farmers would bring in their stock and they would hold them in these corrals, these
Yeah.
enclosures, until the train came to pick them up
Yeah.
when they were on sale. And we used to walk there was a kind of I don't know what you call it, platform. It was maybe about a foot wide or a little more, I don't know, on top of all, to go around these corrals because the farmers would have to feed them.
Yes.
Well, we used to walk on them. I had fun all the time.
So you had good bounce back in those days,
I know.
and you still do, though. So that's pretty good.
Oh, yes. Yeah, a lot of things, yeah.
Well,
And I did an awful lot of walking and hiking. I hiked on many bike-a-thons.
Yeah.
And then my husband and I used to just go walking.
Yeah.
We would hike. I've hiked most of the trails in the Riding Mountains up there. I think I've done most of those trails, and
Yeah.
some we liked better than others, so we did several times.
But that walking was almost a daily part of your life with you and your husband.
All the time, yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
You walked, and
yeah.
you still do.
And walking from our house to the highway and down around to the other entrance and down around back home was 2 miles.
Yeah.
So we did that. It was 2 miles.
Every day.
But lots of times we went the other direction and did more.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I did lots of bike-a-thon too. I won a bicycle because we're not forgotten now. I think it was because I raised the most money. Because I won another little Alpine Archie, they called it, the
Yeah.
little statuette that's out there by McCreary. And I won a little miniature one because I was the oldest person on the oldest person on that hike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've been an inspiration to not only Judy and I, but you've been an inspiration to a lot of people. And one of the things that's very inspiring about you, Olga, and as we share your life's journey, is that smile on your face is contagious, and it has been for many years. And you have a sense of peace, calmness, and happiness within your being, and mentally and spiritually. And I know you're a believer, and I don't want to get into that, but between exercise and being physical fit, you were always kind of a happy person. And I know that you've probably had ups and downs like the rest of us, but you've been able to portray that happiness. Could you share a little bit with us how you think that might have come about in your lifetime, or what has given you that peace and calmness?
Well, I don't know. For one thing, we didn't have too many problems, Growing up, I had a good parents, and I had we were well provided, and you had to make your own fun in those days.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have where we lived in Mackinac. There was no movies to go to. We played games out. All the kids in town would get together, and go out in the streets or wherever, playing hit the can or oyster shells or some of these games.
Yeah.
And we had fun. And then later on we played baseball.
Yeah.
I played ball. I was a pretty good catcher.
Were you?
I can still remember one time it was a man, young man, and he threw the ball in from way up from the field, and I put on my hand. I can still feel it, how it stung, but I caught it. On one hand, caught the ball. Oh,
Did you
dear.
hit a home run or two, Olga?
Pardon?
Did you hit a home
I
run?
wasn't that good at hit. Well, I guess I could. I hit most of the time. I would hit over. Now what do you call that? Left field.
Yeah.
My ball would always go over that side.
Yeah.
I wasn't too bad a hitter, but I was a good catcher.
Being that you played a lot of crib and whist, have you ever got a perfect hand playing crib?
Yes, I have. As a matter of fact, I had it in the paper here in the press.
Really?
I've still got the copy. Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
would, that is
One. Once.
Just one.
I was playing with my sister, Isabel, the one who is from Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
She was visiting, we played cribbage, and she lifted up her hand and she said, "Well, now it comes." And I lifted up mine, and there was the jack to match
Yeah.
that 7, you know. And I said, "Yes, now it comes." And I had the perfect hand.
You had a perfect hand.
And the jack matched the 5, and they all. And I did. I've got the paper yet from the Neepawa Press.
Really?
That had that written. My sister insisted that it go in the paper. You see.
Oh, well,
And
you know, I don't think I've met anybody or heard of anybody that actually got a perfect hand that I know. So
Yeah.
now I know somebody that's had a
I
perfect.
still got the clipping.
Oh.
Someday when you're up in our apartment, I'll show it to you.
Yeah, I'll have
Yeah.
a look
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the time goes so quickly. I know our time has kind of slipped away on us, and I'm sure you and I could talk for another half hour, and maybe we'll do that for another day. But I'm just thinking about your life, your kindness towards people, your happiness, and your physical mobility. I just have a very good vibration from you when it comes to your physical ability, your mental capacity at 100 years old, and your spirituality that you portray, and your sense of humor. And have you always had that kind of a sense of humor and that wit from the time you were small, or is that something you developed over?
Well, I don't know. I don't ever remember. I don't remember it being any other way.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Always had fun with everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, you know, our wish for you, Olga, is that you continue to have fun and enjoy life and get
Yeah.
out and do the things that you enjoy doing.
Yeah. My problem now is my eyesight,
Yes.
because my eyes are. I had macular, and I took needles for my eyes for several months, for quite a long time,
Yeah.
until the doctor said they just couldn't help me anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't have needles anymore. As a matter of fact, I have nothing. So I can't read,
Yeah.
I can't see, and that's putting it a little bit too strongly, because I can see a little bit,
Yeah.
but I can't read. I can't read a book,
Yeah.
and I don't watch a movie on television because I can't see it. But I do listen to the television, because the game shows you don't have to see who they are.
No.
So I listen to that, and I listen to the news.
Yes.
But other than that, I don't watch too much television, and and I can't read. Can't read a book.
Yeah.
But I'm lucky enough to have Canadian National Institute for the Blind,
Yes.
and I have tapes that they send me, and I have the machine that I got from the Blind Institute in Brandon, and so I have my own tape box, and they send me tapes from Toronto, and I can listen to the tapes, and they read stories to me.
Oh,
So,
yes, yeah.
Yeah. And
The other thing you were sharing with me the other day is that you don't have many doctor's appointments and never had over your life, and still don't have a lot of
as a matter of fact, it's not too often that I have the doctor phone me and say, "You better come and see me. I haven't seen you for over a year." So I did. That happened to me last year.
Yeah.
The doctor phoned me and said, "Come on in."
Come on in, yeah. Well, that's a good thing. Eh?
Yeah.
Well, in closing, Olga, I would wonder, would you have any thoughts or suggestions for our viewers to stay healthy and happy as you have for 100 years? Do you have any words of advice for us so-called younger people?
Well, I don't know so-called younger people. I think some of those younger people are doing very well too. But I think you should always be good to one another, like kind, and I don't know. You have to do what you think is best.
Yeah.
I have no idea just how to put those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't hurt anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of what goes around comes around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always had certain people that, of course, you associate with people because they happen to be your neighbors or something like that. But
Yeah.
and no, I've never had a problem with anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on behalf of NACTV,
And
go ahead.
I'm just going to say, and I'm happy to have met you, because if it was not for Lyle, I would be still sitting there with the television. He introduced me to my hearing aids, not my hearing aids, but you call earphones.
Yeah, your earphones. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I certainly enjoy them, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to hear as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I was able to help you there.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, with that, I would like to say thank you, and it's been a real honor and a pleasure to do this chat with you today, and we look forward to our continued friendship, and we wish you the very best in health and happiness.
Thank you.
100 years, 7 months as of today, and young, holy mackerel. Eh?
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you very much, Olga, and you take care, and we wish you the very, very best.
Thank you.
And keep happy and healthy as you have for 100 years.
Yeah.
Okay, well that concludes our
I
life
don't know
journey talk.
whether I did a good job or whether I didn't.
Oh, you
Yeah,
did a good
anyway,
job.
But I said my mother was 100, but she lived only a month and a few days, like past her 100th birthday. My brother, my oldest brother, could have been 100, I'm sure,
Yeah,
because his wife died in December, the last week in December. He died the first week in January. He just didn't want to live anymore.
no,
He says, "What am I going to do without her?"
yeah,
So he just quit eating, wouldn't take his medicine,
yeah,
and he died.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
and he was 3 weeks away from being 100. But and the others, of course, were younger. I had a brother who died when he was 95. But my sisters, one of them was 80, and the other was 82.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I still have two sisters
yeah,
who are living.
Are
They're
living.
both younger than I am. One is 94, and the other one just turned 90. Isabel, I don't know if you met her or not.
no, I haven't.
No, she was here for my 100th birthday. Surprised me. I told her, I said, "Well, don't come." I said, "It's stupid of you to come all the way from Halifax down to here to wish me a happy birthday. You can just do that over the phone." And here she turns up, you know. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I know that you've brought a lot of happiness to a lot of people, and
Yeah.
I think you'll continue on to do that, I'm sure. And
But
so we, again, we just say thank you and good health and happiness to you and your family.
thank you. I'll be happy when I can go out for a walk again.
Yes, well,
Yeah.
that's coming up very quickly
That's
because the
it.
weather's
See,
getting
I didn't tell you about I used to ice skate. I did lots of biking.
Yeah,
I skied.
Yeah.
Not downhill, but cross country.
Yeah.
I skied, and I played golf.
yeah,
And what else did I do? I don't know. I never did much swimming because we had no lakes or whatever rivers close by.
yeah,
But little bit. We took, if you call it, a few lessons. When I was going to teachers' college, they let you go down to the Y one day a week.
oh yes.
You don't
yeah.
learn very much in that length of time.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
I didn't do very much in the water because there was no water around.
yeah,
But I did a lot skating. There was no skating rink either. But my father, there was some land, bush sort of, across from where we lived, and he, being part of the CNR, got them to let him have, and they cut out a sort of a space in the middle of the bush there, and flooded it down, made a skate rink,
yeah.
so we could go and skate there.
Nice.
And then later on, my dad built I don't know what you'd call it, because it was kind of a slide. He built it out of lumber, and it was quite tall, probably 8 feet tall. And you had to climb up, bring your sled, and then away you'd go, way across, right across in front of the other guys, the next lot, right up near the railroad track.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. My dad built that out in front of our house, right by the road. Yeah, and all the kids could play on that slide. Yeah, we had a lot of fun.
Well,
And what you had to do, we had to make our own fun,
yeah,
because all summer long, in the evenings, before we were big enough to play ball,
yeah,
then we would go out and play games. We would play oyster shells and hit the can and all these games in the evening, all the kids in town. Of course, the town was so big, there wouldn't be very many kids there.
no.
Mackinac is, the last time, of course, we had a big fire there, and the whole street burnt down. The grocery store, the hardware store, the post office, everything burnt, and went right up until second store, but they had a big, big yard, so it stopped it from going the rest of the way. Other than that, the whole street went. And say the post office and the hardware store and the grocery store and the house where the people, where baddies lived, all, and the livery barn, because it sort of started. All went in the fire, and we were lucky enough. We lived across the road, so, and the fire went the other direction. So.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Our house burned down. No, that's something else I went through. I had the mumps of all things. Stupid thing, but the mumps were going around, and I got the mumps, and I was swollen quite badly. Anyway, I happened to be in the hospital, and for an examination or something, or the doctor came around, and I got a coughing spell, and he says, "You're not going home." He wouldn't let me go home, but in case I got it was too much, so he made me stay in the hospital. And that night, while I was in the hospital, our house burnt down.
Wow.
Everything burnt. Everything we owned. My husband, the kids slept upstairs. We had an upstairs in that house, and the kids slept upstairs. But because I wasn't there, and Cliff was, I don't know, 6 years old or something like that, and he said he'd go down and sleep with Daddy. Okay, so, but then rather than have him come down by himself and sleep with Daddy, he let Catherine come down too. Mm-hmm. And so the two kids were sleeping down with Peter in the big bed downstairs. Well, that's fine in the house, and he heard a noise, and when he woke, he looked over. There's a fire in the closet, in the bedroom, and there's the fire. And he got the kids and wrapped them in the blanket, took them, and the stairs, all burning already. And had they been sleeping upstairs, who knows? Who knows? But anyway, so there was nothing he could do. He got the kids outside, all right. Yep. But you couldn't save. He saved one drawer. He thought maybe there was some papers and things that we used to put in. He took the drawer. He took two drawers. Couldn't get back into the house anymore. It was gone. Everything was burnt. Everything.
That'd be quite a shock, wouldn't it? Eh? Yeah.
Yeah. And I lived in a granary for a little while. Brought the granary in from the field, stayed in the granary, and then we bought like a farmer had two houses, sort of. One house and his other house his parents had lived in, but his parents were not living any longer, so we bought that house. It wasn't nothing like what the house we had, because we had a beautiful home. Yeah. It was a beautiful home. It had 3 bedrooms downstairs. It had hardwood floors and everything, but it all went. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting how you were able to cope with those things.
Yeah.
And,
well, I see.
And still have a smile.
Yeah. Well, what can you do about it now? I couldn't do anything about it anyway.
Yeah.
But see, we stayed with his parents lived in town, and so we stayed with them for a few days, and then we brought in the granary from the field, and we stayed with the granary until we bought this house and moved the house over, which was nothing. We even had to do a little bit of repair work because it was one of these. It had a big long, the whole length of the building was the kitchen sort of, but we put a partition in there so we could make a couple of bedrooms at the back for the kids. And then in the other part had the living room and the bedroom and a pantry. So actually that's where we lived for a little while. And then we did a lot of moving too. We bought a quarter, and it had a house on it, but it was one of these old, everybody had built the house the same. They had the house, straight house. They had an upstairs going up to the stairs. Then they had a pantry underneath there, and then there was a lean-to at the back. All those old houses were built like that. Yeah, with a lean-to at the back. Well, this house was built like that too. Anyway, we built a new house there. Another house. That was 2 houses we built.
Yeah.
And then we bought the house in town. And we moved to town. We lived in that house for 10 years. It was a beautiful home. It had hardwood floors. And have you ever had any hot water heat?
No, never have.
Ours was steam heated.
Yeah.
With these rads on the side.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful heat. Of course, I kept it going down in the basement, but it would come up through these rads, and that's what we had in that house. Yeah. And hardwood floors, beautiful home. But then after we lived there for over 10 years, I guess, my husband said, I think we should have a new house. he said, this house hasn't got very many any outdoor plugs at all. And I said, and there's different things about it I didn't like. And he said, the entry isn't very, you got to come in here and first thing you know, you want to go downstairs, you got to come in the door and you go, how can you turn to go right down, you know? So I will build a new house.
Yeah.
So we did.
Built a new one. Just like that, eh?
So we did. Well, not right away, because the people who bought our house, we sold it right away with no problem selling it. It was a nice house.
Yeah.
And they wanted to move in. Of course, it was their house then. So we had to move over across. Actually, he was a mail carrier. He used to go to Portage to get mail and take it back to the different post offices. And he used to come, and he said rather than going back and forth to Portage, because when he picked up mail at the post office, he would have to take it back to the mail office in Portage again.
Yeah.
So we rented his house, because he wanted to live where his work was. We rented his house for the year while we were building our new house.
Oh, okay.
And our new house is still there.
Still there. Wow.
Still. We lived in it for, well, until I came to Neepawa, and then, yeah, my husband, I lived in it 8 years after he was gone.
Yeah.
By myself, cut my own grass, I had a big, big garden. Oh.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Well, see, that kept you physically active, and look what it's done for
Yeah.
you, you see.
And until later on, we had a snowblower, but it was a nice snowblower. I could just whoop and away to go. And I was lucky enough too that when I was selling the house, I didn't know. I lived in it for 8 years by myself, and did all the work in the yard too. Once in a while, my nephew would come over with his tractor, but that wasn't very often. And then he decided, he said, "Do you want to sell your snowblower?" So I said, "I'll make a deal with you. I'll let you have the snowblower, but you have to come and do all my snow."
There you go.
So he lived just next door, it wasn't very far for him to come. So I said, that was the deal. I gave him the snowblower, but he had to come and blow my driveway out all the time.
See, that was good for both.
Yeah, it was good for both. And he ended up with it was a good snowblower. I had no problem starting it or anything.
Yeah.
It's just the same as when I cut the grass by myself, and this one, when I was selling, of course I was trying to sell it, and this lawnmower, and of course you just have to pull the chain to start the lawnmower. Well, this neighbor's across there, he said he'd like to buy that lawnmower, okay? So I told him, I don't remember how much it was, $100 or whatever it was, but he wanted to see if I could start it. So I just pressed the button, pulled the cord, wet. I was very, very happy with the first pull. So then he bought the lawnmower.
Bought the lawnmower, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Well, with that, Olga,
Yeah,
thank you very kindly. Well, to our viewers, thank you for being with us and watching our visit with Olga Code, being 100 years and 7 months young today. We hope that you take time to stop and think about our own journey and the importance of physical activity and mental activity in order to stay young and healthy like Olga has over her 100-year journey. So thank you for watching, and until next time, stay healthy and stay happy.